There are two car procedures that I think are the biggest money wasters. That would be oil changes and brakes. Never pay someone to change your oil. You can do it for so much cheaper. When it comes to brakes, it's not rocket science. You can do it. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a plumber, mechanic, carpenter, or electrician. I'm just like you. I like to do things myself. And in the process, I have fun and I save money. You can too. This video is intended for beginners. I'm going to show you step by step how to replace the rear brake pads on your car. Changing out brake pads is one of the easiest ways to save money on car repairs. When I bought this car, the previous owner gave me an estimate from a repair shop. The repair shop had quoted them several $100s to replace brake pads and rotors. I've inspected the rotors. They are perfectly fine. There's no reason to replace them. They are within minimum thickness specifications. The surface is clean and clear. That shop was trying to rip off the previous owner. Rear brake pads with a lifetime warranty from AutoZone will cost you $40 or less. The great thing about lifetime warranty brake pads, especially that these are a part designed to wear out, is that when they do wear out, you take them back to AutoZone, you hand them to the guy at the counter, and he gives you a brand new set for free. I have a 2003 Toyota Camry that I've put about 80,000 miles on over the past 4 or 5 years. I bought a set of lifetime warranty brake pads when I first purchased that car. I have since taken those pads in for a free warranty replacement 3 times. No questions asked. So for 4 brake jobs for the front brakes, I have spent a total of $35. You can't beat that. Let's do some stuff. To replace the rear brake pads on a Buick Lucerne, you will need a 3/4 inch socket to remove the lug nuts or use the lug wrench that came with the car, a 14mm wrench to remove and reinstall the caliper bolts, a pair of needle nose pliers or the specialized tool you can rent from an auto parts store. This is to rotate the caliper piston back into the caliper. You can't just clamp it. This one has to turn. Of course, brake lubricant and new brake pads. Here's a quick word about safety before we jack the car up. Number 1, the jack that came with your car is not intended to be used for repairs. It's intended to be used during an emergency where you have to change a tire and you don't have access to quality tools. If you're going to do a repair like a brake job, you need a real floor jack. People have these all over the place. Borrow one from a neighbor, from a friend. If you're going to do a lot of repairs, it's worth buying one for $150, $200. It's one of those tools that pays for itself over time. Secondly, jack stand. Even a heavy duty jack, I don't trust it with my life. I always use a jack stand. And we don't want the car to roll, so the emergency brake is set, and I'm going to place this block of wood behind the rear tire, the opposite corner of where I'm doing work. That way the car doesn't roll back. The car's on a level surface. Let's get started. Loosen the lug nuts with a 3/4 inch socket or the lug wrench that came with the car. If you are not sure where to put the jack when you jack up the car, check out your owner's manual. There should be illustrations of different jack points where you can do it safely without damaging your car. Jack the car up. Now, remove the lug nuts the rest of the way. Now that the car is jacked up and the jack stand is in place, we want to remove the lug nuts that we've already loosened. This is the rear brake caliper. The pads are here and here. This is the rotor. I've already inspected it. It is within, it's actually well beyond minimum clearance. It's safe to use. Any rust is on the edge and surface. The brake surface where it actually makes contact with the brake pads is perfect. There are no ridges, there are no stress cracks, there are no high or low spots. There's no reason to change out this rotor. Now we're going to remove these two bolts. 14mm wrench. Take them out the rest of the way by hand. These are the caliper bolts. These do not need to be greased because there is a caliper pin that we will grease here in a few minutes. With the two caliper bolts removed, we can jiggle the caliper out of place. Don't let it hang by the brake line. So I'm using this piece of wire. Just want to run it through here. Hang it anywhere. It's safe, it's out of the way. Now let's work on these brake pads. Inner, outer brake pads. All you do is give it a little jiggle. They come right off. Now, as you can see, these things are well worn down. Now we're going to remove the inner brake pad the same way. I'm going to jiggle it. There it is. The new brake pads came with new metal clips. If yours did not, it's no problem. These still work. They're just fine. I'm going to go ahead and switch these out just because it came with them. If you want to compare the new and old brake pads, see how flat that is? Here is the new one. There are a few areas that will need to be lubricated. Here are the caliper pins. I can just pull this back and out. Put a little bit of brake grease on it. Slide it back in. And make sure that this rubber boot is attached like it should be. This was pointed straight up and down. On the bottom one, same thing. Make sure that you are always very careful that you do not get any brake grease or any kind of lubricant on the rotor or on the front of the brake pads. I keep wiping my hands off. I don't want to get any lubricant here. I am going to put some lubricant on the back to match the places where the caliper and the piston were contacting the brake pad. This will reduce squeaking. I've laid out the old and new brake pads because I want to match them up. See, this one has a clip on it, this one does not. This is the inner one. So what I need to do is put grease where the piston was making contact. On this one, the caliper was making contact on the outsides. So I'll basically put grease on the new one to match where the caliper was. Do not get any grease on this side. Just like that. Inner, outer. I've wiped the grease off my fingers. When you install the brake pad, make sure that the curve of the pad matches the curve of the rotor. This is the rear one. Pops in from behind. You line up the tab on the top and bottom. It snaps in. The outer brake pad, same thing. The brake pads are in place. Now it's time to get the piston of the caliper pushed back in so that it will fit over the much larger brake pads. When I say larger, I mean they're thicker than the original ones, so this piston has to go backwards. There's two ways. You can rent or borrow a tool from the auto parts store that will turn this. It's what the tool is made for. It makes it easier, or you can use some needle nose pliers. It takes a little bit longer. It's actually not too difficult. It's turning slowly, it's difficult, but this is going to add maybe 5 minutes to the brake job. That's quicker than running back to AutoZone to rent a tool. It's turning much easier now. You're pushing against all the brake fluid and the pressure, so that's why it doesn't just spin for you. You want these lines, these grooves, to be lined up with the groove back here. That way it's straight. That's how it was when I found it. Let's see if it fits. Slide it over the new brake pads. Alright. That was easy. Time to replace the caliper bolts. Again, this is our 14mm. And I'll show you the reason why I'm using a wrench instead of a ratchet. It's just because on this bottom bolt, there's not quite enough space between the bolt and the rest of the steel of the car to allow me to get the ratchet in. So I just use the wrench. It does the job just fine. Doesn't take any longer. Once they're finger tight, get it really tight. Same thing for the bottom one. They're slack now. That's because we've twisted and pushed that piston back in. Once you pump the brakes a few times, you come back, there will not be any slack here. So the bolts are tight, everything's lubricated. I do one quick visual inspection to make sure that I did not get any grease on the rotor. It's clean, it's good to go. Let's put the tire back on. Now I can remove the jack stand, lower it to the ground, tighten these lug nuts up the rest of the way. These need to be tight. Number one, release that emergency brake, and number two, we're going to have to start the car and then pump the brakes, because remember we compressed those brake pistons inside the calipers. Now we've got to give them space to re-expand to engage the brakes. Start the car. Okay, now I want you to see my foot. Watch this. When I first pump the brake, it just goes to the floor. Almost no resistance. Keep doing it. Each time it gets a little more firm. That time's really firm. You'll feel it starts to feel like normal the more you pump it. And once you reach that feeling, you know all the brake fluid is back where it's supposed to be. Brakes are tight, everything's good. Take a quick test drive to make sure that everything's working properly. Now that these brake pads have been changed out, I can feel a pretty substantial difference in how well the car stops, how smooth it is when it stops. It just feels more secure, more sure-footed, and if that's what yours feels like after you do this brake job, then you'll know it was the right call to change the pads out. Thank you for watching A Regular Guy Does Stuff. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe to my channel. I want to try to keep putting out videos that will help you save money doing things yourself. Remember, the Bible says in Romans 5:8 that God shows his love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Now go out and do some stuff.